how many times I've seen something exactly like this.
This is insane.
It's unsatisfying and unoriginal, and it plagues the genre. But even with found footage being overshadowed by terrible movies, I also can't think of any other genre that has more effectively terrified me when it works. I will never forget my first time watching movies like Gunjiam Haunted Asylum, or Lake Mungo, or Noroi the Curse. The atmosphere that these films craft are a testament to how difficult and effective found footage can be. And while I absolutely love all of those films, that's not what I'm here to talk about. I want to talk about a film that you've probably never heard of and definitely never seen. Nightmare movies. And today, I want to talk about the terrifying film Invisible 2: Chasing the Ghost Sound. Before we dive into this one, I want to give a few notes so nothing is confusing. Someone, luckily, uploaded the whole film with English subtitles on YouTube, but the translation is definitely off at points. It didn't distract me personally, but it's something to keep in mind if that might bother you. It is also only available at 360p, which I personally think only adds to the atmosphere, but again, personal choice. With all that out of the way, let me give you a breakdown. The film starts with an interview with a woman named Mrs. Lee and an unseen person who I'll refer to as the director. Mrs. Lee is seeking the help of a man named Mr. Jung. Apologies in advance for my Korean pronunciation. Mrs. Lee is looking for help from Mr. Jung since he apparently professionally records the sounds of ghosts, and she wants his help identifying and expelling this terrifying presence in her home. Unfortunately, he is under contract with the director, so if Mrs. Lee wants his help, it's going to have to be filmed. Conflicted, Mrs. Lee doesn't know what to do, and as the director is about to leave, fast forward to January 25th, and we are introduced to the whole crew, and most importantly, Mr. Jung. Together they make a long trek over a frozen lake deep into the woods and eventually arrive at Mrs. Lee's secluded guest house. Now, even though there's no inherent threat, this entire atmosphere is eerie, and that's something I think Invisible 2 does exceptionally well that most found footage films get wrong. In typical found footage slop, most of the time is wasted on characters that nobody cares about, setting up nothing of interest. But from the start, we know something is wrong, and Mr. Jung can sense it too. Mrs. Lee gives the crew a tour of the house and gives us some more context about the sound that she's been hearing. The director asks if the main room is where she's hearing the noises, but she corrects him, saying that she hears them all over the house. As the crew investigates, you'll notice that Mrs. Lee keeps looking at the cameras, acting uncomfortable in their presence. They continue the tour until they enter the main room of the house, and Mr. Jung is already inside. As soon as they enter, he leaves to the confusion of Mrs. Lee, but the director brushes it off as nothing more than him acting abnormally, like he always does. One of the last rooms that they investigate is what the director refers to as the honeymoon suite. As they enter, Mrs. Lee closes a magazine lying on top of a pile of other magazines. Throughout the tour of the house, it seems like it was mostly well kept and clean, but as soon as they enter this room, it feels like it was just abandoned. The room is this bright pink color, contrasting the rest of the house. It was also the room that Mr. Jung was entranced by when they first entered the property. After a quick walkthrough, the crew shuffles out and Mrs. Lee adjusts the magazines one more time before locking up. And with that, the crew gathers in the dining room to prep for the night. The director hooks up a lav mic to Mrs. Lee and shows her their helmet camera, a staple of their show apparently, and has supposedly captured pictures of ghosts for them many, many times. Though the director explains how it might not be useful since she hasn't seen any ghosts, only heard them. Right then, Mr. Jung speaks to her for the first time. He asks whose voice she's been hearing. After prying for an answer, she reveals something interesting. She believes it's the voice of her dead sister. Immediately, Mr. Jung senses something's off. He tells her that they need to talk in private, but the director interjects. The director has a better idea. The two are sat down for an interview for the show. Mr. Jung asks Mrs. Lee how her sister passed away. She explains that it was a hit-and-run accident. But not only did her sister pass away, unfortunately, her husband did as well since he was in the passenger seat. Mr. Jung asks if she ever hears the sound of her husband in the house as well. She says that she doesn't, so Mr. Jung shifts his questioning to what exactly Mrs. Lee has been hearing. She says that she doesn't quite understand what it's saying, and that's why she needs his help. So Mr. Jung obliges and has Mrs. Lee write down a few questions to ask her dead sister. And so it begins. Mr. Jung and the crew continue their investigation throughout the house, listening for any signs of a ghost. The last room that they end up in is the honeymoon suite, and after finding nothing, they decide to take a break. But as they're leaving, Mr. Jung looks in the magazines that Mrs. Lee was organizing earlier and finds something that changes everything. Mr. Jung confronts Mrs. Lee with a photograph and asks her once again to speak in private. The director once again intervenes, saying that they should have a cameraman on them at all times, promising to edit out anything that they don't want shown. So with no other choice, Mr. Jung asks about the photograph once again. Mrs. Lee explains that it's a picture of her and her husband, nothing more, but he doesn't buy it. He claims that the woman in the picture is not Mrs. Lee, and she finally confesses. Mrs. Lee had a twin sister, and as Mr. Jung explains, in the photograph, she can be seen leaving a hotel with Mrs. Lee's husband. Finally, Mr. Jung confronts her about it, accusing her of being the one who committed the hit-and-run accident, and that the quote-unquote ghost she's been hearing is nothing more than her guilty conscience. Mrs. Lee starts screaming at the whole team, telling them they have to leave, and she is furious, telling them to turn off all their cameras, and they finally do. Suddenly, we're back in the honeymoon suite with Mrs. Lee. The director comes in and sits next to her, assuring her that the camera isn't on. He pries at her, trying to get more information from her. She feels like Mr. Jung is investigating her, and so to keep the episode going, the director promises to kick Mr. Jung off his team. But just as they're finishing their conversation, a crew member frantically opens the door. The crew listens, and we hear this strange creaking noise coming from the roof. Mr. Jung takes a listen and laughs to himself before leaving. So up until this point, nothing paranormal has actually taken place. We assume that the house is haunted because, well, it's a horror movie, but all of that buildup leading to what is essentially a creaking floorboard is disappointing. And Mr. Jung shares that sentiment with us. The crew is packing up to leave for the night, and something doesn't feel right to Mrs. Lee. She says that it doesn't sound like her sister. This isn't what she's been hearing, but the director assures her that they will analyze the sound and get back to her. As they're leaving, setting up their next destination, Mr. Jung finally confronts the director. He tells the director he knows that the sound was faked, and that this wasn't the first time he's pulled something like this for his quote-unquote reality television show. But before the director can rebuttal, the crew rushes back into the house to find Mrs. Lee, and eventually, they do. She's curled up in a corner, panicking. She says she's hearing the sound and that they need to turn on their stupid helmet camera so she can prove that it's real. She wants to capture this ghost, and Mr. Jung immediately turns on his sound equipment to locate the ghost, but he needs her help. Mr. Jung tells Mrs. Lee to start asking her sister those questions, and she does. The crew follows Mr. Jung around the entire house, recording a total of 5 sounds. They all gather together in the main room to analyze their findings. They listen and listen, trying to make out what Mrs. Lee's dead sister is trying to communicate to them, but it's not working. This is when the director asks to speak to Mr. Jung. He takes Mr. Jung into a room and confronts him, claiming that he's faking the sounds as well to trick Mrs. Lee. Mr. Jung denies it and rebuttals that he heard the tape playing that his crew planted to fake the sounds. The two go back and forth until it's apparent that there is no way they can continue working together. Mr. Jung looking for the truth, and the director just trying to make entertaining television. The director and Mr. Jung leave Mrs. Lee's home. The director telling her that he'll be back, and Mr. Jung explains how to listen back to the recordings on the laptop. As the crew is about to leave, Mrs. Lee asks them for one last thing. Now, I want to warn you, we've talked about the entire plot, but I would recommend, if you are at all interested, go watch this film right now before I spoil the last 10 minutes of it. It is one of the best crafted horror sequences that I have personally seen in a long time, and I want you to be able to experience it. That's your spoiler warning. Mrs. Lee, alone in her house, turns on the helmet cam and starts going off the rails. She's walking all around the house, telling her sister things like, "You came back for forgiveness, didn't you?" and hounding her about the affair she had with her husband. She eventually finds a mirror at the end of this hallway, and Mrs. Lee confesses what we already guessed. She was responsible for the hit and run, and now she believes her sister's ghost is haunting her. Alone in the dark now, Mrs. Lee is desperate to capture her dead sister on camera. She finds herself back in the honeymoon suite and finds the pile of magazines, one titled Puzzle. Mrs. Lee puts it all together and runs back to the laptop. Slowly, Mrs. Lee starts reorganizing all the sound clips. All of it is incoherent until she finds the right order. So there's so many reasons why I find this little short horror film to be so effective. And a lot of it comes from the information you learn on replay. The characterization of everyone at the beginning of the investigation is brilliant. If you remember, Mrs. Lee first explains how this is a guest house. Now, there's 2 possible theories that have interesting implications for her character. The first is that she's lying, which is setting up how she's constantly telling half-truths throughout the movie. It's the same reason why she keeps looking back at the cameras and why she didn't want them there to begin with. Another theory that I had was that if this was the guest house, then her plan to murder her husband may have been much more methodical than it first seems, maybe killing him and receiving insurance money after the fact. However, I think she's simply lying considering the honeymoon suite. It's the first thing that Mr. Jung notices upon entering the property, and it helps characterize him as different from the rest of the crew, and that he also seemingly has some sort of insight that they don't. The honeymoon suite is also an interesting name for it, even if it might be a mistranslation. I'm certain that Mrs. Lee's sister was staying with her at this house, at least for some amount of time, and that was her room. It explains why it's so different from the rest of the house, and why she's so cautious upon entering it. And calling it the honeymoon suite helps form more of an idea of what Mrs. Lee's husband and her sister were really doing, and how often they might have been doing it. The idea that their affair could have even taken place in Mrs. Lee's own home is horrifying and tragic. Other than the subtle storytelling and characterization, the thing that I love about this film is how it doesn't waste time. If it's not setting up characters in interesting ways, it's building an atmosphere or unraveling the story. Now, by no means is this a complex story that we're unraveling here, but it's a good story told well, and that is always better than a great story told poorly. It doesn't matter if your story is simple. If you can tell it in an engaging way, it will still be terrifying. And with that rant out of the way, I think I can end it here. I hope I introduced you guys to a new film that you can enjoy just as much as I did. I'm Nightmare Movies, and I'll see you guys next time.